Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Welcome back to another edition of Having a Crack with Big Mac, Rosco and Jono. And for today's little podcast episode, we ventured out, or myself and Rosco ventured out, because Johnny was absentee on this visit, to the lovely distillery located in Healesville. And we had a great discussion with Cam, one of the owners there, just about gin. And we are coming into that season now where gin is very much on everyone's mind coming into spring with all the beautiful weather we are hoping to have here in Melbourne. Unfortunately, we've had a fair bit of flooding going on, but we are expecting some brilliant times ahead, and what better way to do that with a Four Pillars gin? So here's our interview with Four Pillars gin owner Cameron Mackenzie. All right, welcome back to another edition of Having a Crack with Big Mac, Rosco, and unfortunately Jono is absentee for this evening's little interview with Cameron at Four Pillars Gin. He's had some prior engagements to attend to, but that's all right. We will definitely fill him in on the amazing experience we're going to have here today. So without any further ado, welcome aboard the podcast, Cameron. How are you?
Mate, I am terrific. Thank you for having me along, fellas. I have no idea what I'm in for, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
Comes with the right attitude, so we're excited about that one.
Most definitely. Most definitely. But, yeah, we've just stepped foot in this amazing palace, I guess you'd call it, Palace of Gin. Wall to wall, just amazing scenes that you can see here, from stills to the decor to the bottles just plastered all around the venue and premises here. It's an amazing experience to get, and it's right in our backyard. So,
and the aesthetics here are very, very impressive. It's just straight in, off the door, wandering down through Healesville, and it's right there. Just Four Pillars Gin, just right there on the big letters. And we couldn't be in any better position here to have a look at it all, and a very impressive setup. And why don't you talk us through how this business come about and what we're looking at here too, like this little visual that we've got, that's very, very impressive with this little bar up the top. And yeah, see the stills, see the bar, and what better to hear it from the owners of the business.
Yep. So tell us where it all began, Cam.
Oh, God, I really don't even know. It's one of those things that just was a bit of an idea that got out of hand, and I think that happens so often in business. When you start doing something you absolutely love, it's very easy for that to snowball a bit out of control and build. If you start a business looking at the finish line, often I don't think they work, but we didn't do that. We just looked at the start and said, well, what do we want to do, and let's have a bash at it. So my background was in the wine industry. I started in production and sort of moved my way through into more commercial roles and then winery management. Prior to that, I worked in pubs, which I loved, and prior to that, weirdly, I was an athlete.
Did you break any world records?
I didn't break any world records. I did manage to get to one Olympics, and just missed the Sydney Olympics. I went to Atlanta.
Wow.
As a relay runner in the 4x4 and just fell shy of making the Sydney team. But it was in between Atlanta and Sydney that I met Stuart Gregor, who's my best mate, and a bit of an idiot, and just a clown that I've hung around with for over 20 years. And he was working in the wine industry in sort of communications and PR and marketing, and I was sort of given to him as an assistant to the powers that be thought I needed a cushy marketing job if I was ever going to make an Olympic team. I couldn't be doing all the physical work at the winery, and it sounded pretty good to me. But if you were to graph my athletic career and my booze career, the point at which one plummets and the other takes off is the day I met Stu. So I've sort of guilted him into starting a gin distillery with me.
Okay, so you mentioned wine before. So what was the precursor to stopping you from deciding to go down the wine avenue together and create your own wine as opposed to jumping into gin?
I'd kind of done it. And, as much as I love the wine industry, and I'm a classic wine wanker, I still love wine, and Stu and I still pontificate about wine endlessly and drink a lot of the stuff. I got to a point where I was fed up working for other people, and I really wanted to run my own business. Stu had set up a good PR comms business up in Sydney called Liquid Ideas, and I was just sick of working for people. I wanted to do my own thing. Gin was always my white spirit of choice, because it is very much aroma, flavour, balance, weight, texture. The same things we look for in wine, we look for in gin. The big difference was gin's, for the most part, an ingredient. You don't tend to drink a lot of neat gin. I do, and I drink it over ice, but I'm in the minority. So, our original discussion was, could we make tonic water? Back, 12 years ago when we started the idea, there was really only Schweppes and Kirk's in Australia. So it was a brilliant idea, but I didn't have the wherewithal to start a soft drink factory. And we could kind of see in North America in particular, distilling was on the move. There was a massive craft scene, and we could see it teetering on the edge in the UK as well. And we sort of thought, well, we do have a tendency to follow those places. So we can see what Bill Lark's done down in Tassie with whiskey and a few others. There wasn't a huge amount happening in gin in Australia. Maybe Kangaroo Island and West Winds were doing some stuff and doing really good things. But we just kind of thought, well, maybe the tax office is dumb enough to give us a licence. And as it turns out, they were. And we spent about 18 months, nearly 2 years, sort of building towards the point where we launched Rare Dry Gin. I was working at Rob Dolan's winery part-time, just helping him set up his new business, and I did that on the condition that he would give me a bit of space to put in a still and make a bit of gin.
Beautiful.
And Stixie's, I don't know if you've ever met Rob Dolan, he's a legend. You should do a podcast with him.
Yeah.
And he gave me my first job in the wine industry in the 90s. And I still remember Stixie coming out the first day that I was distilling our first batch of gin. It was trickling out of the still. And he just walked up and he looked at me and said, "Cam, Jesus, I could piss faster than that. Are you sure about this gin thing?" And I said, "I'm not sure about this gin thing and you're not helping." But as it turns out, I think it was all right. So
fantastic.
It's very impressive to know that, some of the mentors in your starting position were there to help you on your day when you started your own sort of business, and what an impressive sort of follow through it's been since that. You say you can't see the finish line when you start a business and these sorts of options, but it's done really well in a sense that you've grown this business from the ground up, and quite very impressive with that setup.
Yeah, look, I've been incredibly fortunate to come across people who have mentored me incredibly well and offered me brilliant counsel along the way. And Rob Dolan was one of those guys. He's still a little ginvestor in this business, and just a great guy who sort of mentored me through wine and in different areas of wine. Stu Gregor, exactly the same, sort of took me through that sort of marketing and comms side of the business. And Matt Jones, our other partner in the business, an incredible guy to work with, very strategic, and stops the business being a folly. He sets the language of this business. My idea was, I'll make gin 2 days a week, I'll run Rob's winery 3 days a week, and I'll go fishing on the Goulburn. And I think I've been to the Goulburn 4 times in 10 years, but I'm starting to get out a little bit more. But it was, I just thought it would be a small cottage business. We'll have a bit of fun. It won't lose money, but it won't make a lot of money. But Stu and Matt had other ideas, and I think they could see, they're very much finger on the pulse guys when it comes to industry trends and the way things are working. And they sort of said, look, the opportunity is, number one, stick to gin. Don't make gin while you're waiting for whiskey and rum and everything else to age. Just stay in your lane. You love gin.
Specialise in it.
Absolutely.
Get the ticket right.
And if you want to be a global craft business, stay with that one product. For us, we struggled to see too many global craft players that had crossed the streams, if you like. The other thing they said was, don't make Australiana gin. There's a place for that, but that's not us. Let's look at modern Australian gin. Don't make London Dry gin. I love London Dry gin, but the world didn't need another one made by 3 bald Australians. So, what does all of that mean? And don't hurry it, take your time. So we spent 18 months before we released Rare Dry Gin, and we've never changed anything about that gin since the day we released it. The recipe is exactly the same. The job now is consistency, and it's 85% of our job is that gin. So it was that. I think if I'd done it on my own, there probably would be a few barrels of something stupid in the corner that just distract the message of gin. But having great partners on board and really good mentors who made me stay in my lane, challenged me in the right areas, but allowed me to take my time and create something different. And the other thing was working with winemakers out here over the years. You know, Steve Flamsteed, who was up at Giant Steps for a long time, Flamo, who's a great mate of mine, I watched a guy grow production in a business and just be ruthless with quality along the way. He didn't cut any corners. He just grew those incredible single vineyard Giant Steps wines and innocent bystander wines. And at no point did he ever compromise quality. And I think we've adopted that attitude here, working with people like that along the way.
And you make mention as well about the mentors, but it's funny, you've grown so big now that I'm sure there'd be a bunch of up-and-coming distillers and owners of gin distilleries as well that would be looking to someone like yourself to try and give back a bit of that, that sort of that information as well, to try and help them on their journey that they might take as well. And you're definitely at that level. It's such a large company that you've created now as well. And from where you started, is it pretty much like out of Australia in particular, do you sort of find that there's only sort of a handful that are doing the same amount of production that you're doing here at the moment as well in terms of overall gin?
I think the industry is going to go through an interesting phase. There's now more distilleries here than in Scotland. And I think everyone's going to go through a bit of an identity crisis as to what are you as a business. Matt Jones once identified to me 3 types of business, and it made sense to me at the time, and it still does now, and that was, there was a cottage business that sort of sells farm gate and cellar door, if you like. There was a craft business that might have a bit more of a presence in the closest local city, maybe Eastern Seaboard, and then there was craft with scale, which is a global craft business that controls its quality and its production, but it tries to have a more global footprint. Aesop would be a great example. Hermes, brilliant luxury craft businesses, and you can't talk to Matt without him referencing these brands. But he was absolutely right. So we sort of started in craft and with a view to trying to move into craft with scale. And I think what's happening at the moment is a lot of people have looked at us and said, I think we've made it look easy, but people forget we've worked our asses off to get here, and we continue to work our asses off. It's never got any easier. It just gets busier and busier and busier. So if they're prepared to do that, terrific, they've got a real chance. But I think a lot of them perhaps are more sustainable and more profitable if they stay small and don't bite off more than they can chew. You don't want to be in no man's land, you know. So we're fortunate we're nearly 10 years in, so we've had a good run at it to build our economies of scale and build our production and build our volumes without compromising quality, and we've learnt a hell of a lot along the way. I think it is really interesting, that whole mentoring thing. You know, I drink a lot of coffee, and I'll drink coffee with anyone.
Yep.
So, you know, it's rare that a week goes by that someone doesn't come in for a coffee from another distillery or from a startup, or contacts me with a few questions. You know, at a rum distillery today up near Byron that had a few questions in their startup phase, and you know, I kind of love that. And Stu and I did a huge road trip through North America from Portland, Oregon, down to Los Angeles, just visiting distilleries. We didn't go to the UK to learn how to make gin. We went to North America because no one in the UK would answer the phone or an email, just wouldn't even talk to us really. And I found that really, really interesting. And there wasn't much happening in Australia. So in North America, they just said, what do you want to know? Come and see us, hang out with us for half a day, bring a heap of questions, take a heap of photos. So we sort of adopted the attitude that we never wanted to be the dickheads that said no. We'll always have a coffee. And if I've got the answers, I'll give you the answers. If I don't have the answer, you're probably not asking the right question, so I'll give you the question. And I think that's just a far better way to be. I've got a really wonderful network of mates through the whole industry in Australia now and around the world, and I think that collaborative approach, and I think there's plenty of room for Australian gin on the shelf. It's not that I don't see anyone in Australia as a competitor. Of course we're competitors, but our main competitor is always going to be the imported gins.
Yeah.
And there's so much room on the shelf for us to take a bit of ground off them. And so if we can if we can help out, all I ever ask of any of those guys is pay it forward and make sure when someone knocks on your door, you have a coffee with them.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's we've done that from day one.
A very important sort of point you make there, and there's obviously businesses that are following, there's businesses in front, there's always that sort of situation, and you say there's a spot on the bar for a lot of Australian gins, and we can see quite a number of Australian gins up there on the bar, and they do look impressive. And one thing you won't find Macca in here is for coffee, because he doesn't drink coffee. He won't be here having a chat with you about that, but he'll certainly pop in for a gin, I'm sure.
Yep, you're spot on there.
I'll do a green tea for you.
That'll go down all right. Now, you mentioned sustainability, that word just before as well. Now, that's something pretty near dear to Roscoe's heart. He loves and he's pretty passionate about, obviously, a fair bit of sustainability within businesses, within the household as well. So maybe give us a bit of an overview on how Four Pillars has become such a sustainable business as they've moved on.
Yeah, look, sustainability is an interesting one, and it's a thing that we started on about probably 3 years ago, really. It's always nagged away at us, but with the new development we did next door, we had an opportunity to sort of really, address some of the issues. Distilling is an energy-hungry business and it's a water-hungry business, and they're two things that are... We've got plenty of water, as fate would have it right now, but this is a drought country, and we've got to be more responsible with that. So we spend a lot of energy heating up stills, and we spend a lot of energy cooling down condenser water in order to reuse it. If we don't cool it down, we could drop 60 or 80,000 litres a day down the drain, and it's just fresh mains water. It's crazy. So when we designed next door, we had a company called Breathe Architecture, who were just brilliant to work with, a very sustainably focused architectural firm, who sat down with us and said, "What are your issues?" And I said, "Well, my issues is I've got a vacant block and I need a new bar on it." And they said, no, we get that, but what are your production issues? What are the things you nag on about every day that frustrate you? And I said, well, energy and water. So that was an opportunity for us to really address that. The first thing that we did was obviously heaps of solar. So we've got plenty of solar on both roofs, which was great. But then they looked at really interesting passive ways to cool all of our condenser water. So rather than just coming out of the condensers at 70, 80 degrees and going to a giant 300 kilowatt chilling system, which ran almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the first thing they did was divert it through our air conditioning unit, so that in winter we actually just knock fans on that hot water and heat the cellar door up passively, and all we're really paying for is a couple of fans.
Yeah, fans to run. It's a smart setup. That is very good. And again, another one to be recycling water as much as possible. Do you ever got something set up there with recycling water when you're putting it in the chiller and all that?
Yeah, so it will move through the air conditioning system and then into this incredible veil that's going around the building. I call it a fence, but if an architect calls it a veil, they can charge 3 times more for it. So that ornate copper artwork, tubing that runs around the building, there's a big chunk of that where once that hot water goes through air conditioning, it passively cools through the fence, then goes through like a radiator and then into the chilling system. So the chilling system's now running at about 10% capacity when it was running at 100% capacity. And that knocks a massive amount out, and we just recycle that water. That happens on 3 of our 4 production stills. The 4th production still, we actually collect fresh, hot mains water every day and refill the stills with hot water. So we get an energy efficiency by not having to heat the stills up for as long every morning. And these stills hold heat beautifully. So tomorrow morning, those stills will still be sitting at 45, 50 degrees instead of 14 or 15 degrees. So it was just a really smart way of doing things. Even the stillage from the stills, that liquid that we tip down the drain at the end of the day, or that chai smell that you have in here, that waste, we used to spend energy cooling that down because we can't put that in the sewer at above 38 degrees, and it comes out of the still at 96. So they set up an underground sort of system of drains that just passively allow it to dissipate heat and gives people their first sense of smell as soon as they walk into the building. That's not by chance. That's part of this system, is just slowly dissipating that heat, and the first sensory experience is that. So it's just clever. And that eliminated all of this power-hungry energy use to cool what was essentially waste.
Yep.
Those were the sorts of things. Then they said, well, why are you opening your own bottles of gin in order to make drinks? That just seems ridiculous. And we said, well, how else are we going to make drinks? Yeah, I'm a bit thick. And they said, well, you got all the gins in tanks, so why don't we just set up all the gins on tap?
Direct line.
Yeah, so we just fill our own bottles and make drinks out of refilling bottles rather than throwing our own bottles
Away all the time.
away all the time. And then the last one, which we're just fine-tuning, is tonic, having tonic on tap. And once that's sorted out, and it's pretty close, we're just getting the carbonation right, but that'll drop 800 kilos a week of glass out of this business and 14 recycling bins. So...
And more money, like you'll save actually more money by doing a lot of these things.
All of these things are an investment that ultimately save money. We're a carbon neutral business. We were certified with Climate Active in March this year as a carbon neutral business and a carbon neutral product. None of those things that I've just talked about have been factored into that carbon neutrality or that carbon neutral status. The work starts now, and our whole sustainability plan really starts now. It's not good enough to be carbon neutral. You now need to say, well, how, we pay offsets like every other carbon neutral business. How do we minimise those carbon offsets? How can we get this to a point where we're reusing waste? We made 25,000 jars of marmalade last year from gin steamed oranges. I think we're a marmalade factory.
It's almost a second use of a product.
Yeah, absolutely. All of our spent botanicals will get turned into either salt or chocolate, and the worst thing that happens is garden mulch. And we're just chatting to the garden centre up the road at the moment about a 4 Pillars garden tonic, and just they will come down twice a week and grab all the spent botanicals. It's probably 1.5 tons, 2 tons of that a week. Mix it in with some mulch and chuck it on the garden. It's brilliant. It's brilliant mulch.
It would be, yeah.
And it smells great, and there's only one local bird that seems to get pissed on it. The rest of them are pretty good with it. So that's part of the plan, and challenging our staff with that too. They're part of the sustainability plan, and a lot of them have put their hand up to say, okay, we'll champion the cause here on recycling, and we'll champion the cause on minimising plastics and glass, and it's
being aware of those sorts of things. I mean, it's just the future. Realistically, you're investing in your future while you're setting up a business and teaching others in those sort of things. I spent 20 minutes in the worm farm before I came here, thinking I was an eco-friendly warrior, but I think this guy tops me for that one. So.
We got a lot of work to go. I think B Corp is something that's on our mind. That's probably the next step for us, which will take a couple of years, but it's a great challenge to have. It's really good to empower your team with that and say, well, we want you a part of this plan, and we want you talking about it, and we want you to challenge us. So we're not bullshit artists, and we're not just greenwashing things. We won the IWSC Sustainability Trophy this year, which was huge for us because, again, it hadn't factored in a huge amount of future plans. It just showed that what we've done so far deserved a bit of credit. And I think it sets a standard and makes people look around corners. And every distillery should be saying, what can I do with my waste? Surely there's another use for this. Yeah. And for us, you guys can smell it when you walk in the door. The place smells great. Yep. So there's still something there that can be used. So that's part of the challenge, and I love that challenge. I think it's great for us all to think around corners.
Just on that award that you just mentioned there as well, just for a couple of listeners that might just be a little bit sort of novice to that award in particular, that was a a global award that you won, correct?
Yeah, IWSC is the International Wine and Spirit Comp in London. We sort of view that as the Oscars of our industry. It's a really important competition for us. We've been fortunate to win the Gin Producer of the Year twice, along with Herno and Kyoto, 2 distilleries that we've collaborated with and really great mates of ours. So this was the inaugural sustainability trophy called the Green Initiative, and it was open to all categories, not just gin distilleries. So for us to sort of get the chocolates on that one was really important for us, and it showed our team that there is recognition for this. It's not a matter of you do this and it goes unnoticed. It sets a standard for the whole industry. So, we're thrilled with that. And I look at what people like Brookies are doing up north, their B Corp, they're just legends for doing that. And
they're in Byron, are they?
Yeah, they're up that way, yeah. And we've chatted to them. We're going to go visit them soon, and they're really collaborative. They're not doing it just for themselves. They're doing it because they want the industry to follow suit, and they're the natural knowledge bank for everyone to go and have a chat to, which is awesome.
A bit of a team environment there, sort of, sharing the knowledge and practices, and making sure, the other people that are starting up can get that information too, which is really important. So now we've been chatting away for a little bit, and I think, these have been sitting on the table here for a little bit. So why don't we have a little bit of a tasting because we don't want to.
We've got a couple of spirits here that Cam's kindly sort of brought out for us as well. So we have the Four Pillars Rare Dry Gin.
Yeah, this is the heart and soul of Four Pillars, to be honest. You know, 85% of our job is this gin. And it's also the basis of the last gin that we'll taste, which is Bloody Shiraz. So this was the first gin that we released. This is the first gin that we had the guts to release, to be honest. And when I say we didn't want to make London Dry and we didn't want to make Australiana, this was the result. And we sort of talked about this being more a reflection of modern Australia, in that Australia is very much a part of Asia. So why would we ignore some of the incredible spices we can get out of Southeast Asia and beyond? Nowhere tastes like Australia, so we can anchor this with a couple of interesting native botanicals. And then citrus for us is a huge part of this business. We take full advantage of the fact that we can get fresh, organic, unwaxed oranges 12 months of the year. That is an advantage over making gin in London or Europe, where you'd have to use dried peel.
Okay.
So big canvas of juniper. It's not weird flavoured vodka. It is unmistakably gin. It's still 80%, probably a little bit over 80% juniper by dry weight. A London Dry gin only needs to be 51%. So there's a mountain of juniper in there as that canvas. Some really cool spices: coriander, cardamom, star anise, cassia. The two native botanicals are lemon myrtle and Tasmanian mountain pepper leaf. And I think lemon myrtle, to me, I always say it's the pin-up child of native Australian botanicals. It's probably the most available in many respects. But every single time we take samples of lemon myrtle overseas to show international distillers, they all think we've doctored it. They don't believe that a leaf can
That's
be
such a strong scent.
so bright and
You only have to rub your
vibrant.
fingers on the leaf as you're walking past the bush and you get that scent instantly. Like lemon myrtle's a classic.
Absolutely. You know, we had a lemon myrtle tree in our backyard growing up, and I still remember it. It's your strongest memory trigger is aroma. And my idiot brothers and I would play cricket on a hot summer's day, and that game would end in either an all-in brawl or an afternoon storm. And my mum, Wilma, who our first still was named after, used to always say, "Boys, you all smell like lemonade." And it was only because we were diving into the lemon myrtle to get the ball out all the time.
Classic
and
catches.
it just sticks to you. So, yeah, it's incredibly potent. Tassie pepper's got that beautiful pesto green tea, white pepper warmth. But then the amount of fresh orange in this, and just oranges cut in half in a vapour basket, we're not peeling them, we're not juicing them, gives that lovely, warm, almost Mediterranean feel about it. It's a classic gin and tonic gin with a slice of orange, good martini, good Negroni.
And it's very smooth, neat.
Soft, clean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Non-offensive. It's just, and as you touched on before as well, that you tend to find yourself, you drink your gins neat. I think you might have been telling us prior to the pod, but yeah, this is a gin that the more and more you sort of get yourself into gin, you could easily drink this neat, even if you drop an ice block or something like that in there as well, just to try and take a smidgen of the edge off as well. If it was slightly a little bit too much for you, then that's all you need, because you really want to get a full scope of every bit of flavour that's coming from this gin, because it's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. But, you know, we find in America in particular, a lot of people call our gins rocks gins. They're just drinking them over ice, which I totally understand. I tasted a lot at home. I find in this building my senses get skewed a bit by the aroma of the building. So I taste a lot at home. So I find myself sipping gin quite neat, and I really love it. But just over ice, wedge of citrus, I just think orange with this works really, really well. Brings out the other spices and just makes a nice, bright, vibrant gin. And it's done really well for us. You know, 4 months after we released that, it won double gold in San Francisco, which was huge for us because I didn't even know Stuart entered it. I was actually filthy with him for entering it. So I said, shit, what do we need a bronze medal for now? And as it turns out, won double gold, which was great because it not only gave me a bit of confidence in my early days, but it meant we were gin. I was terrified, are people going to see this as a weird flavoured vodka? Even though we've got a big canvas of juniper, it's really important to me it ticks that box for being gin. And it's won double gold there 3 times now, and it's won, you know, golds and trophies all around the world. And every time that happens, to me, that just validates that it's a good, contemporary, modern Australian style of gin.
Yeah.
And that was what we wanted to make, that tick that box. And like I said, we have not changed the recipe for that. Our job is now consistency. Those big tanks that you guys can see, that no one on this podcast can see, that's my master stock of rare dry gin. We try and never empty those tanks. We just take little portions of high proof out and top it up with high proof, and it gives us beautiful consistency from January through to December. And yeah, I love it. It's still apparently I'm not supposed to choose a favourite child. But my youngest daughter's awesome. The other two are a disaster. So I find it no dramas whatsoever in choosing this as my favourite of our gins.
Yep. And something I probably should have asked slightly before as well, which we always got to ask our lovely guests on the podcast as well. So firstly, the name Four Pillars, where did it originate, and the style of the bottle? Is there a story behind that as well, / the logo and label as well?
Look, it's probably more a question for Matt. The name is very much about you can build a foundation on Four Pillars. It's a bit, that was kind of where it started. There was quite a funny drinking game Stu and I used to have called the Four Pillars of Humanity, well before we started Four Pillars, about the 4 different types of people in your life: reliable, quirky, pests, and awful people. And it was just this very funny game that Stu and I used to play over the years. And when he sort of mentioned it to Matt, he said, sort of, what do you think of the name Four Pillars? And Matt said, I love it. You can build anything on 4 pillars. So we sort of stuck with that. Matt very much designed the bottle. There were a couple of other spirit brands out there that we kind of quite liked the look of. Mm-hmm. But he ran with it with War Design, and they just came up with a really beautiful, simple approach, just 4 dots on a bottle, and we really liked it. It wasn't gregarious and overstated. It was just ahead of its time, and we haven't changed it at all, really.
Yep.
We might look to drop a little bit of weight out of that at some point, again, from a sustainability point of view. But it's just a sort of classic. I love seeing places use it as...
Classic is the word to use. It's just perfect for that.
Yeah, and people use it as water bottles, and it's kind of a bit of a keeper. So that was it, really. It wasn't... I didn't put much science into it. I think Matt gave it a great deal more thought. He put the branding brains in, I put the liquid brains in, and that worked pretty well.
And we only asked that question again because there's some, I suppose, distillers out there as well that have deliberately sort of crafted their bottle design to be linking in with something else. It might be whether it's a still that looks like a still, obviously, that they've got as well, or same with labelling. It might have a sort of a history behind it. But there is actually a funny story. Your stills have actually got names. Is that right?
Yeah, they're all named after our mums. Wilma, my late mother, was our first still, and I just thought that was an appropriate name because my mum had 5 sons and she could explode at the drop of a hat. So... and I don't think you've ever seen a person put away martinis like my mum. So it was just the perfect name for the still. Jude is Stu Gregor's mum. Our little still up in Sydney called Eileen is Matt's mum. Matt's mum doesn't drink. So for a while I'd actually called the water tank Eileen, but I thought, no, we better get her a still. And then there's a few of our key team members. Scotty, who was our first full-time employee running our hospo area, he's still with us. His mum is Beth, Big Betty over there, the biggest still. Coral up here. Michelle Hall started with us half a day a week paying invoices. She's now Director of Operations across 140 staff and 3 sites. Coral is her beautiful mum.
Wow.
And then Elton, who you guys met on the way in, who's an absolute rock star and just is the absolute heart of Four Pillars experience when people walk in the door here. We've just named Linda after his mum, and that's our new still. So
Beautiful.
We kind of surprise staff with this at various things. We make a bit of a deal out of it, and they all burst into tears, and it's unreal, and I love it.
And it's quirky. It's funny that all the names, they all link in. It's very traditional names that everyone's all got in there, but it's a great way to sort of think about the, I guess, a pillar of your life as well that's helped you grow up as well, is in your mum. So...
Absolutely, yeah. And they're all, it's a shame my mum passed away so many years ago because she would have loved these mums. They're all incredibly funny. Don't get me started on Coral. My God, she's got the filthiest sense of humour of any person I've ever met. And just so much fun when they come and visit, and they really get into it as well. And the whole team get into it. It's really good fun.
Yeah.
Fantastic story, and, so impressive to hear that people in the team are getting recognition again. Like, you know what I mean? What an impressive sort of recognition you could get from being a team member down here, and you're committed to the business, and you get some sort of event like that where you can. It's just it makes so much more sense when you're down here talking to you, and you might not think those sorts of things exist in work environments and that sort of thing, and then something like that happens. What a surprise that would be! So,
Yeah.
So
we're bloody lucky. We don't. have a great deal of staff turnover. There's people who've been with us since we started back in Warrandyte, and they now run the bottling line. You know, I think we're very, very lucky, and it's a very simple policy that if we're going to spend as much time as we do at work, I really don't want to hang around with clowns.
Yeah.
I'd really like to work with people I enjoy going to work with every day and build a business I would want my kids to work in.
Yeah.
And two of my kids are kitchen hands on weekends scrubbing dishes, which I think's brilliant. And
Good on 'em.
You know, that's the environment you want. Good mentors are now part of the business. So, you know, we're very lucky.
Yep.
Yeah.
And run us through this next drink we've got here is the olive leaf gin.
Yeah, look, we released this in the middle of a pandemic, another genius move of ours, but it actually worked quite well because I think people were drinking martinis a lot during a pandemic. And I love a martini. You know, I think it's such a beautiful, clean, fresh drink. I just think there's a number of roads you can go down when you make a gin. You can be quite citrusy, you could be quite spicy, quite floral. I don't do floral gins. I find them a bit soapy, but maybe I just haven't cracked the code. But you can also be quite savoury. And a lot of these gins come from collaborations we've done somewhere else where the germ of a good idea and a small batch, we nag away at and go, yeah, but now let's develop that into a bigger release. So our very first collaboration was with Santa Maria in Spain. And, you know, they were three guys who started a gin distillery in Madrid. And Stu and I needed an innovative way to take our families to Spain on a tax-deductible holiday. So
Now we're talking.
we reached out to Javier and Victor and said, look, what if we come over and we bring some Australian botanicals and we make a batch of gin with you, and then you come over to Australia and bring some of your botanicals and make a batch of gin with us. And it was just brilliant fun. We also found the easiest way to smuggle green, leafy Australian native botanicals in Ziploc bags was in the kids' luggage.
They won't pull up the kids.
No, they don't check a Peppa Pig suitcase very often. So, but that was the first time we used more savoury botanicals like rosemary and bay leaf, and we made a really cool gin called Cousin Vera's Gin, and their still's name was Vera. So we made Cousin Vera's Gin, and people still talk about it. But we always felt we could make it a slightly bigger gin, you know. So that was sort of the start of Olive Leaf, and it took us about 4.5, 5 years to get it right. One of the really interesting moments was going to Cobram Estate for the olive harvest up near Boundary Bend with a heap of winemaking mates from the Yarra, and we shared, you know, a little 10-seater plane and landed in the middle of this olive grove. And the second we got off the plane, we were all looking at each other going, God, I'd smash a martini. Because as they're harvesting those trees, they're hitting them and releasing all the oils. And you
Tractor driving through and
amazing. Just this green, herbaceous lift just blows you away. So we started grabbing all this olive leaf to bring back to the distillery to do some trials with. Then we did the oil tasting with Cobram, and all their single varietal oils were mind-blowing, just really rocket, pepper, even through to tropical characters. So this gin, we use fresh rosemary, fresh bay, 3 types of olive oil that we tip into the still.
Wow.
So Picual, Coratina and Oki Blanco, and a mountain of olive leaf, macadamia nut for a bit of texture, and then lemon myrtle, fresh lemon and fresh grapefruit, and that's over a big canvas of juniper. So it's a brilliant martini gin. It's savoury, it's textural, quite sweet, and I just love this gin. I'm a martini fiend.
This was definitely my favourite as well when I did try these the other week.
Yeah.
It's so delectably smooth. Just the way it can just coat your tongue all the way down to the throat. It's so delicious. Really, really easy.
I love it, and I like it just in a martini with a twist, to be honest.
it's a lot more savoury too. You hit it on the head with that one. You can definitely get that savoury note to it, but yet it smells sweet as well. Like the sense there in the sweetness on the nose, but obviously that taste there, it's different sort of drinking complexity. It feels different in the mouth, and it's got that savoury sort of sensation. Straight away.
It's a touch of spicy you sort of get in there, but again, because of the oils, I reckon that still rolls through. It sort of helps sort of command and soften that blow of expanding any further as well. Like it's really, really delicious.
It makes a really good gin and tonic too. Just change up the garnish, a bit of rosemary and a bit of lemon, and it's very Mediterranean and just savoury but really clean as well. You know, our guys love this in a dirty martini. I think that's going too far. I think that's bordering on filthy martini. But I understand if people love that slightly more briny character, to me it's almost a dirty martini just with a twist of lemon. But if you really want to take it the next step, and this is the one that's probably surprised us a bit, but it shouldn't, in the US, because it's a martini market. It's not really a gin and tonic market. That's a weird colonial drink is a gin and tonic. They drink martinis, and worse, they drink vodka martinis, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. So we're trying to convince them that the martini is a gin drink, and this is the gin they should have. And this is one gold in San Francisco as well, and that doesn't surprise me because that's the palate. It sort of works as almost a bottled martini.
So was James Bond with his martini? That was a vodka martini, wasn't it?
I think he went half-half, didn't he?
Half vodka, half gin?
Yeah, was he the Vespa? I can't remember. But
The only thing I remember was shaken, not stirred. So I can't remember what it was in it. But
Well, that's a margarita in my book, so always stirred. The only mistake I ever made with this gin, actually it's quite funny, we stupidly put a call out on a local Facebook page for fresh rosemary and fresh bay. I don't think there's a viable rosemary bush in Healesville anymore. People ripped out of gardens, and we had garbage bags of the stuff. Someone ripped out the local St Bridget's primary school's rosemary bush near the headmaster's office. I got a phone call about that one. And I was like, look, sorry, I think the teachers drank well that Christmas. But, we've never done that since. We've got a couple of growers now.
Oh, good.
send in a couple of bottles and keep everyone happy at the end of the year.
Exactly.
No, it's really... it's really, really interesting, Gin, and you touched on it just before with the US market. So or have you already started a lot of exporting of your product already into other parts of the world, and is it in a large scale, or are you doing sort of smaller scale initially?
Yeah, look, it's probably close to 20% of our business is export, so we're still about 80% domestic, and I don't know that that'll change. We've got 20-something, 21, 22 export markets. The UK and the US are looking, are growing, which is really cool. And then a lot of smaller markets around Southeast Asia. The Nordics, we do okay. And then travel retail's coming back. That was a big part of our business, was duty-free, and it stopped overnight when the pandemic hit. That's bouncing back probably a little harder than we thought it would. Good. Which is great, and Asia Pacific is still well behind the eight ball when it comes to travel, because China's not open yet, and Hong Kong and Japan's only just sort of reopened. So there's certainly room to grow there. It's hard and it's expensive, but again, that was always our aspiration, was to be a global craft business. So, Stu and I travelled a lot for a long time, and then COVID clipped our wings, and it's quite cool to get back on a plane again. We seem to coincide most export trips with some sort of major sporting event if we can. So
why not?
World Cup's coming up, mate. You go to Qatar?
We're not going to Qatar. We're actually going next year to Qatar. We should go this year, but we might sneak a rugby game next year in France.
Nice. Very nice.
We might have gone to the Kentucky Derby this year. So it does break up the trip quite well. You still got to have fun, even though you're working your ass off. You still got to have fun. And I say that to guys all the time starting distilleries, and I talk to them all the time, generally around Christmas time. And I say, don't forget to sit down with your partners and have a drink. Yep. And toast your success, because you're still here and you're still working hard and you haven't gone under, and you've ridden all the bumps. Just enjoy it, And I have a tendency to send a few text messages out a day or two before Christmas to just people who I've become quite close to, saying, don't forget why you got into it in the first place, and just enjoy the industry, because it is bloody good fun.
It is, and that's part of the reason why I've stayed touch with liquor industry for this sort of period of time. I think I've been in it for now, what are we going on, probably 5-6 years I think it is now, but it's such an evolving atmosphere of product that's out there, and it's changing all the time, and from new distilleries popping up, new products, new styles, variances, the whole works across multi-different platforms in wines, spirits, RTDs, beers, the whole works, and it's such a niche industry where everyone comes together and learns so much more together as well, but you stay in touch with a lot of the people that...
Distilling's in its infancy in Australia. We've still got so much... I know we've got a lot of distilleries, but our best spirits are in front of us. I think Four Pillars, our best gin, is still in front of us. I think we can make even better gin, and I think Rare Dry can be a better gin once I keep it in tank for a little bit longer, and it'll build more flavour. So if it's doing well now, it's going to do even better in the future now that I've got a bit more space. I hate bottling fast, and for me, fast is sort of 6 to 8 weeks after distillation. You could bottle this stuff within, 2 days of distilling. It just wouldn't be a great gin. If I could leave it in tank for a year, my CFO would kill me, but I think it would be a much better gin. So the longer I can keep high-proof gin and just take bits of it out and top it up and run that master stock system, which is something I kind of learnt from Alex Davies at Kyoto Distillery. That's why we collaborate, is we all want to improve. And it doesn't look... He's not my competitor. We look great next to a bottle of Kino B on the shelf. That's not how it works, If you're going to take your gin list seriously, you can have gins from all around the world, and it's not out of place to have an Australian one.
They're all bringing a different element to it, and this next gin that you've just poured out for us most certainly does that as well. It's something pretty much up my alley when I tried the Fever Tree yuzu and lime, which just struck a massive chord with me. And when I realised that you guys had done a yuzu gin, my eyes just shot out of my head, I reckon. I thought this was going to be an absolute elite drink to try. So run us through... this one in particular, mate.
Yeah, look, yuzu is a really interesting citrus. Again, I reference Kyoto and Alex Davies. It was the first time we played with yuzu, and it's a citrus fruit that has its origins in China and Tibet, but is probably best known for its use in Japan. It's kind of almost a schizophrenic citrus in that when we have it in season and we hand it around to people to smell, someone will say grapefruit, someone will say lemon, someone will say lime, someone will say mandarin, someone will say kumquat. It just goes on and on and on. It's got this incredible, twisted, multifaceted citrus character, and that's what we loved about it. We played around with it in a version of rare dry gin that never let the distiller name a product, called Rarer Dry Gin. And it was really, really popular. So we worked with a grower up near Myrtleford, Jane and Brian, who were chestnut growers up that way, and ripped out their chestnuts and put in yuzu. And they were really keen to give us more fruit this year so we could actually do a proper release of it. We got about 2 tonnes of fruit, which was great. And I love it. We use a tiny bit of finger lime in this as well to just pep up that brightness. There's some turmeric to give it sweetness and freshness on the palate. There's a really interesting green tea called Sencha Genmatcha, which is green tea with roasted brown rice through it. So that brown rice gives a slightly starchy texture to the gin. And again, that big base of juniper and a bit of myrtle and bits and pieces. I just love it. I think it's a really interesting highball gin and soda. Sometimes we'll work at the drink and work backwards, and the guys were sort of saying, look, we're seeing more and more people wanting gin and soda in our bars here and in Sydney. So why don't we make something that
tailors that
goes well with gin and soda? So tricky, but I think we got there. I drink it with soda. I think it's a really good drink. It makes a good martini.
Yeah, yep.
Nice and clean and fresh. And beyond that, I haven't actually made another drink with it. It's been a gin and soda or a martini, I'm ashamed to say, but...
And so this is the core range we're having a little taste of now as well, isn't it? So you obviously got these other ones that limited release varieties that come in and go sort of depending upon the time of the season, the year. Is that how they work? Or obviously sales obviously represent that's a great one that people want to drink. We'll run with that for the next summer or something along those lines. Is that how that works?
Pretty much. Some of them just graduate and some of them I just overrule. So olive leaf gin I just overruled straight away and said, no, that's going straight in. To the core, that's not going to be a limited release.
Provided you can keep up with demand,
exactly.
As such requirements. So yeah, you got to get all your ducks in one line, don't you? As you said, you got to get those
100%
spices that you need. You can get them, but the leaves that are the most important part that lend into that, the rosemary that you mentioned. Again, it's another one that's a key factor. But it's a requirement. So once you've got that number of items down, you're ready to go and you can produce.
Yeah, and that's where seasonal stuff comes in. And, we're often playing around with those seasonal gins and seasonal fruits. The 4 pillars rare dry variations, which we do little batches of each year, and that's where we did rarer and rarest.
That's the ones up on the second top shelf, is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so this year we played around, instead of yuzu, we used kumquat. To stop the kids throwing them at me at home. But a really interesting take on rare dry gin. And then the bergamot one we did last year and this year, which, we don't make much of these. They're just interesting experiments, and they have a bit of a following. So we make enough to run out.
Yep.
Christmas gin's another one that we've just released for this year. A small batch, interesting, fun.
Got a great raisins in there, maybe something along those lines or something.
Yeah, mixed peel, raisins, currants, all of the Christmas spices. It's actually the 1968 Women's Weekly Christmas pudding recipe. And we just take out the binding agents and put it over a base gin recipe and age it in old Rutherglen musket barrels and give it a tweak of musket before bottling. So that's part of why we do what we do. Gin didn't innovate for 40 years. It sat there as London Dry gin and some pretty ghastly slow gins. So to be able to innovate and make more contemporary styles, I'm not saying we won't one day make a London Dry gin. I'd love to. But for the moment, I think we've still got a fair bit of room to move just to muck around.
There's no limitation, is there? That's the best thing about it. The science behind it, you're perfecting that as you go.
Yeah.
Using the seasonal, the options you've got there, but you've got the core range under control and there's other options to try this, try that and see what people like. So it's fantastic to know that you mentioned it yourself, that maybe the best gin is still to come. So
100%. And it keeps our distilling team, pretty fresh, because otherwise it's Groundhog Day. They want to make different gins and they want to experiment. And that's why little Coral up here in the mezzanine is so important. She'll make 35 bottles of gin as good as those
the big ones
production stills, and she'll do it in 2 hours.
Yep.
So if we've got a new botanical, if we've got a new idea, we can calibrate it in this still, and
initially,
it's not hard to scale it up into the bigger one. That's how fresh yuzu gin started, was in this still.
Yeah.
And then we scale it up. But we learnt all about yuzu first in a couple of other gins that were small batch, saw the momentum there and said, okay, there is an appetite for this. Let's see if we can get the fruit, to your point, and see what we can do from there.
And the point you just touched on there as well about the difference in the size of the stills as well. We have been to a few different whiskey distilleries in the past where they have mentioned that a smaller still can potentially give off a different flavour for whiskey versus what a larger still can as well. So whereas in gin, it's all about calibrating your units, I suppose, as well, the stills themselves, to make sure that it is equivalent of what you are doing at a larger scale as well. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're different recipes for different stills for the same gin, because a 450 litre still will take 5 hours. A 2,000 litre still takes about 8.5. So we actually wind back things like Star Anise and Cassia in the big stills because they've got so much more time to extract all those oils.
And they're pretty powerful as well.
They're very, very powerful. And you find that out the hard way by the first thing you do is you just scale it up and multiply your still by 4 and see where it takes you, and you make ouzo.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh shit, there's way too much Star Anise in there. We've got to wind it back. So, but that's great. That's part of the learning curve of distilling, which we love, and we now know that. So you've got a bit of a head start after 10 years of doing it. You can scale up much easier. The big stills are really just rare dry gin. Every other gin that we make is in the 2 smaller stills because it's not a huge part of our business. And things like Spice Negroni gin, that was a one-off that just graduated to a gin that we make more often these days because Negronis are huge, and something I thought we'd make 2 or 3 batches of and was popular and sold out. And then we get hate mail for 3 months from people who didn't get a bottle. So you go, I might as well make some more of it. And all of a sudden we're making it reasonably regularly because people just ask for it. So.
It's a good thing you can adapt as your needs require it. As you can adjust it, you can say, all right, well, this is the upcoming production line, but let's throw an extra one in here because it's going well. We can do it again, and the team are on board. So yeah, it's really adaptable, which is good.
Well, the handy part with that is the fact that gin doesn't require necessarily as much time as what your whiskies do, so it gives you more flexibility to be able to be, I suppose a bit more adaptive to what your market requires.
Yeah, we've got space to take our time with it. We don't have to do it massively quickly, but compared to whiskey and rum, it's significantly faster. Yeah. I don't know how the whiskey guys do it, to be honest. That's crazy money tied up. But, Australia's making great whiskey. So.
Most definitely. And this next one that we're about to try now, this has got a great story behind it. I always love hearing it as well, and how it all sort of kicked off, mate. So this is the Bloody Shiraz gin for those listening. Cam, fill us in, mate, because I love this story.
I think this is the ultimate in gin not innovating. because people kept asking us to make a slow gin, and I was like, why do I want to, what's with this slow gin? I hate almost every slow gin I'd ever tasted at the time, and we don't really grow much in the way of slow berries in Australia. There's some good ones down in Tassie. I don't like adding sugar to things. So we started asking people, well, which slow gin do you drink and how do you drink it? And they'd say, oh, I don't drink it at all, I've just heard of it. I thought, well, that's hardly the way to change your business model. So we were based at Rob Dolan's winery. Fruit was coming in for vintage, and Robbo was just muttering about a little homeless parcel of Shiraz grapes that a grower had brought in. It was about 250 kilos, which in his winery, that's just a pain in the ass. He's putting through hundreds and hundreds of tonnes. So he put it in the cool room and kind of forgot about it. And Scotty and I just went and stole it that afternoon. I repaid all of his kindness by flogging his fruit. And we spent the afternoon de-stemming it, so just ripping all the stems off. We got rare dry gin straight out of the still at about 93% ABV, tipped it over the grapes in a tank, put a lid on it and put it in the cool room. And within about 3 hours, the colour was just the deepest, darkest purple I've ever seen.
Attacking those grapes.
Yeah, it just bled the colour out, bloody Shiraz, and the alcohol killed any wild yeast that was there, so there was no fermentation. There's no wine in this, there's no barrel in this. This is just gin and juice. Snoop Dogg at his finest, There wasn't a lot of science to this. After about 8 weeks, we pressed it all off and removed all the solids. The grape juice brought the alcohol content down to about 24%, and we tasted it. It was delicious. Amazing fortified grape juice, but didn't taste remotely like gin. Again, there was no science. We just stood by the tank and tipped in more gin until we could taste gin. And when we finally swirled the glass and went, yep, pine forest, pine needle, citrus, spice, and a heap of that lovely peppery red berry Yarra Shiraz.
Fruity as.
Yeah, we said that's it, and that happened to be about 37% alcohol. We put everything up 0.8, so 37.8. We made about 600 bottles of it, and it sold on World Gin Day and over the next week or two. Didn't even put a label on it. We just had a neck tag. And then I really got hate mail. So the following year we bought 2 tons of fruit. And Stu and Matt said, God, you're going to be swimming in it. You're never going to get rid of that. And it lasted about 3 weeks.
Wow.
This year we crushed more Shiraz than any winery in the Yarra Valley. We did 257 tonnes.
Wow.
And next year we'll be north of 300. So we're putting the Yarra Valley on the map.
Yeah. So if you're using more Shiraz like grapes and that sort of thing as well, as opposed to what the wineries are, wow.
We were bloody lucky, If it hadn't been Shiraz that had come in that day, this product might not have existed, because my Scottish heritage prevents me from paying $3,000 a tonne for Pinot, so that was never going to happen. And I don't. Pinot would be great, but I'm just not too sure about that. Cabernet doesn't ripen every year out here. It gets a bit green beanish sometimes, not all the time. But Shiraz is a real workhorse out here in a cool vintage, and let's face it, I don't know what this year's going to be like, but Shiraz will deal with it. It's not going to split and go mouldy or anything. Cool vintages, white pepper, red berry, spice. Hot vintages, it's black pepper, plum, deeper characters. We now pick vineyards at different times of the year or throughout the season. So we'll pick some super early to give us nice natural acid, nice white pepper, nice red berry. And then we'll pick some quite late that give us more colour, more depth of flavour, more sweetness. So, 15, 20 years in the wine industry teaches you a few tricks. Yeah. And the more of it we make, the better the gin every time, because big tanks don't oxidise. And we bottle it throughout the year. And when we're holding big quantities of it on a 45-degree day, that tank won't shift half a degree. And we retain all those lovely primary fresh characters. And it's just a ripper gin. I love it. I think it's bloody funny. I love watching bartenders play with it. I love watching people just drink it over ice. But I really love watching bartenders take classic drinks and turn them into something interesting. A blood side is a south side. A jasmine becomes a bloody jasmine. Who Shot Tom Collins is a classic that Sammy Ying made. And
with the blood.
Yeah, and it was just funny, So it's a really interesting gin for us, it's somehow created a category. There was an entire category of grape flavoured spirits at the Australian Distilled Spirits Awards this year.
Yeah, because you were definitely the first Australian offering, wasn't it?
I don't think I've seen one anywhere in the world.
No.
I think we were the first. And it's interesting because you can't make that in the UK. They're not growing grapes. So the biggest gin market in the world isn't doing that. And I think we've inadvertently created a category. And again, we've helped quite a few people along the way. We've got an alcoholiser here that tests for alcohol and takes into account colour and sugar. And I'm fine with anyone bringing a sample in to get an accurate reading on their alcohol, because it's of no benefit to me for there to be a shithouse Shiraz gin on the market, because someone will ultimately confuse it with mine. So I'm better off making sure that, if I've got a chance, if I can help someone, that helps the category gain fantastic momentum, become a really creditable, category within it. We had a monopoly on it for 5 years, and now all of a sudden they're popping up everywhere. I didn't invent gin, so I'm not going to get my nose out of the joint. I think it's bloody fantastic that people are jumping on and having a crack at this. Why shouldn't it? It's a category Australia could probably own if we get it right.
Since we've got some of the best Shirazes, obviously, across the world as well. So
and Pinot and Sangiovese, Nort Distillery over in Eltham, Big Chris Cameron, who's a ripper bloke, and he's making a Sangiovese gin. Never do a Grenache gin with Grenache.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Patient Wolf do Pinot. Like, they've obviously got more money than me.
Yep.
And just great blokes, and they're making really, really good booze. And that's great for all of us.
I was just going to mention as well, where you were mentioning before about the other 3 gins that we tried earlier, how you are able to keep consistency the same with those because of the ingredients. Is there an element with this one, because you're sourcing the grapes and grapes could change every year as well? Does that potentially affect the consistency year to year on what your production might offer?
Look, it could, but again, I think having great experience in the wine industry and in vineyards has helped us immensely. So my whole production team are pretty much all winemakers. And Ben Payton, who's got the winery over the road, Payton and Jones.
Oh, yeah.
The best winery that looks like a bikie clubhouse. Pato, his old man's a viticulturalist. He owns his own vineyard as well. Having someone like that there, and Sarah Prowse, who's our production manager, who was a winemaker for many years, every season going into that season, we'll look at the vineyards and we'll say, okay, we'll pick that one a little bit earlier and we'll pick that one a little bit later. And we're ironing out the kinks from vintage to vintage because we can control that. We actually found in 2017 when we released Bloody Shiraz, it was quite a pale year, but we didn't get a lot of colour in grapes that year. And even though it was one of the riper years, a few people were saying, they're stretching it now, look at the colour. And we went, well, we're not stretching it, it's just not much colour, and we don't add synthetics.
So you're still getting the genuine drink anyway, it's just...
And it's sold out in, weeks.
Yeah.
But we said, well, we can actually control that by just picking one vineyard much later and building that colour. So we can control that, why wouldn't we? So every year we try and make it more consistent with the previous year. There's always a few, if you find it's more spicy, it was probably a pretty cool vintage. If you find it's more plummy, it was probably a pretty warm vintage. And we're really good with that. Every now and then it will oxidise and change. There's no doubt about that if you leave that on the fireplace for 6 months, a half bottle of it, it'll start to go brick red, it'll become portier, it'll never go off. And I get maybe 5 emails a year from people around the world saying my Shiraz gin isn't the same as it was when I opened it 8 months ago.
Because it's evolved.
And you say, well, that's fine, I'm happy to swap it out for you if you want, but try a Charlie Chaplin or try a traditional slow cocktail and see, because it's going to build those deeper characters, more advanced characters that you tend to see in a slow. And I've shit-canned slow gin enough, but at the same time, Bill McHenry makes a beautiful slow gin out of Tasmania. If people want to see a great slow gin, Bill McHenry makes the best slow gin in the world. Herno do a very good one. Who else? Elephant Gin make a good one.
Yep.
Sipsmith do a good one. We don't see much of it in Australia. But there are some really good ones where they're balancing the sugar better.
Yep.
But Bill's is the best slow gin I've had anywhere in the world.
I stopped out there last week for a little bit of a visit.
Yep.
I was down there at Port Arthur.
What a ripper bloke.
Yeah, I didn't meet him. I met the guy in the cellar door little area, and we did a little tasting of gin, and I had a few of their whiskies as well, which was really impressive. And
Unreal.
And the best thing about that was another person in the industry that knew their knowledge, They would share it with you. We popped in there just unannounced on the day. There was a lady in there doing a tasting of their gins, and I was down there with my wife, and I had a couple of their whiskies. I was keen to just taste the whiskies around the distilleries of Tasmania, and his knowledge was perfect in the whiskey side of it, because he said, listen, this is our cask strength. I think they had Australis and they had something else, and they did this tasting of it, and he said, look, the cask strength just drinks better, feels better, and he was spot on with all of the knowledge that he shared. Yep. And that's the sort of thing, when the people are in the industry, they love to share their knowledge and let other people know how this works, this whatnot. So it's a real shame that I didn't get to meet Bill himself, but like, it was just an impressive little setup down there, and they're sort of, it's unknown because it's a bit of a drive out, and you're sort of driving down this back track for 4 kilometres, and you think, where am I going to end up and all that. But yeah, it's just and that's a classic sort of distillery, Australian style. Yep. There's no real history as such before that it sort of becomes what it is. And as you said, it's sort of in its infancy, the whole industry is, and there's these guys that are characters, and I say it loosely because we've talked about the guy from Belgrave as well. He was another guy.
Amazing. Mate, some of them are pretty loose units, but they are making incredibly good booze, and Australia can make world-class spirits. There's no doubt about it, whether it's whiskey, rum, rye, gin, vodka, whatever. There's no reason we can't. We've got a world-class wine industry, world-class beer industry.
And conditions.
Yes, absolutely. We can do it really, really well here because we don't have to follow the rules in a way. We can be an innovative country and change categories. I think Australia's making the most interesting gins in the world. And you only have to look at a lot of the major competitions around the world, and Australia is punching way above its weight. So it's fun, mate. I still love it.
It most certainly is, mate, and we've come to that point of the evening as well, where we'll give the listeners a bit of an overview, obviously, on the products that we've tasted as well, price points as well, which I think most of them sort of hover between I think it's about $60 to $80 mark. Is that about right?
Yeah, round about, probably high 60s through to sort of mid 80s.
Yeah. And all generally available at your local independent retailer, your Dan's, BWS, Liquorlands. I think they're pretty much across every channel that you can sort of get them at for the 700 mils. And then they have also just released the lovely ready-to-drink RTD range in 3 different varieties, which is in the rare dry, gin and tonic, and the fresh yuzu gin and soda. There you go. Gin and soda, and also the bloody Shiraz gin and tonic as well. So definitely for any new drinkers out there as well, even if you're wanting to dip your toe in the water into gin itself, the RTD is your best avenue to do that, because then you can try it in its truest format and then progress into your own 700 mil and pick up your 4-pack of Fever Tree tonic to mix with it as well. So,
giddy up.
Been fantastic, mate. So thank you once again, for having us here. It's been an amazing experience and loved every second of it, Rosco. We've enjoyed it, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. As we said, we get to meet the guys in charge and the team behind it. They talk about it all and very well established sort of price for the quality that you get here as well, because they're outside of the standard range. These guys are putting in the hard work and really creating some special stuff. And if you were a bartender, this is the one that you're going to reach for, because there's a lot of things you can do with it, as you mentioned. And we just had them, obviously, just a little neat drink and just sort of tasting those flavours and whatnot. But that bloody Shiraz is something out of this world, realistically. It's just a ripper, that one. So, yeah, certainly get your hands on one of them if you can next time you're down the shops. And, yeah, it's a winner for sure.
It certainly is, mate. So thank you very much, Cam, the owner of Four Pillars Distillery in Healesville. Make sure you check out their socials on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and be sure to come out and visit the distillery as well for your own little private tour. And you can sit in and have a nice meal while you're here and enjoy a nice G&T as well.
Guys, thanks so much. That's been fun. We'll do it again.
Most definitely will. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers, Cam. Wowee. What an amazing experience to sit there with Cam from Four Pillars Gin and hear about the stories all the way from their infancy into where they are now, exploding across all gin markets around the globe. It really, really, truly was a testament to seeing determination and knowledge be paired up together, surrounded by a beautiful team and network of exciting, enthusiastic people, just really trying to push together in the same direction to achieve such an incredible outcome in Four Pillars Gin. Now, for anyone else out there listening, make sure you head to your local liquor retailer, pick yourself up a bottle of their 700ml, or even go and grab a 4-pack of their premix as well. They definitely don't disappoint. We are coming into gin season. We pretty much should be in gin season, I should say, if these floods decide to ever bugger off. But make sure you definitely go down and pick yourself up a bottle or a 4-pack. And even if you're heading out to the Yarra Valley, stop in and go and see them. They're an incredible team down there with brilliant, up-to-date facilities as well. Ask them about the sustainability angle. It is incredible to hear that story. Get a tour around the distillery, try some tastings, and even grab yourself a little bite to eat down there. They're an incredible bunch, and we are very, very thrilled to have had the chance to chat with Cam on the podcast. So thanks very much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next spot.